Evolutionary.org, Hardcore 2.0, episode 74, coming your way. Today we're going to talk about Trenbolone, the good and the bad, with Euro Pharma. In Euro Pharmacies, they have a lot of different options, a lot of blends. They have different, they have vials, they have amps. We're going to go over all the Euro Pharmacies options for Tren. And Tren is one of the best steroids out there. And we're going to talk about the facts and the history behind Tren, where it came from. A lot of people don't understand the Tren history. A lot of people think it's just a vet steroid. They don't understand that, the truth behind it. So we're going to kind of clear up the misconceptions on it. We're going to talk about what Tren is good for. Why do people use Tren? Whether you're a normal Joe, whether you're a physique competitor, whether you're open bodybuilder competitor, whether you're a power lifter. A lot of people use Tren. Whether you just want a beach body, a lot of people use Tren. We're going to go over that. We're going to talk about the different Euro Pharmacies options, how to stack each one, lots of different ways to stack Tren. And we're going to talk about the side effects behind Tren. Although Tren is one of the best steroids you'll ever use, it's the Lamborghini of steroids, okay? And it's the ultimate one that we always strive to use. We build ourselves up to using it, but it does have some side effects which have to be discussed. It's very, very important we go over it. So let's first talk about Trenbolone history. So injectable Tren acetate was first released in the cattle industry in the 1980s under the name Finajet, and it contained the short-acting acetate ester. So this Trenbolone preparation was used to beef up cattle right before slaughter. Now, Parabolin itself in the late 1990s was discontinued, but before that, during the 80s, mid late 80s, early 90s, as people started, as Parabolin was available, people started to blow up. So it was Negma out of France was the pharmaceutical brand behind Parabolin, and they actually sold this stuff human grade for pharmaceutical grade for people, for bodybuilders. This was one of the things. What's interesting about Tren is that it's one of the few steroids out there which was actually designed specifically for bodybuilders. So bodybuilders could blow up on it and get results. So once bodybuilders got a hold of this stuff, you started seeing physiques. It was a combination of things. It was HGH as well. But Parabolin was a huge reason why the bodybuilding industry started. You start seeing these massive physiques because Tren does something that other steroids just don't do when it comes to nutrient partitioning. It's basically a sponge for your muscles. That's why when you use it, you grow like a weed on this stuff and you get so strong on this stuff because that's really what it was designed. So I can remember back on the forums back in the 2000s, a lot of people, you'd have these guys on the forums and what they would do, Mobster, and you remember this really well, I'm sure in Britain, you have a lot of people, and they started to make this stuff at home. And why don't you talk about that if you know a little bit about it?
I said on a recent show, Steve, you could still find the pellets on Amazon of all places. But what happened was, Steve said, and I remember specifically seeing a guide to how to do this in the Muscle Media magazine, Muscle Media 2000, Bill Phillips magazine, with Dan Duquesne and others discussing it. And as you said, exactly as you said, I mean, we've talked about some of the veterinary steroids and how much you can get huge, great bags of this stuff for a special gun, but it's very low milligrams per milliliter. So you get very excited when you realize you can buy a liter of steroid solution, but a little bit less excited when you realize it's not very usable. So what happened here is exactly what Steve said. There were literally copy and pasted explanations, I think, involving mortar and pestles. So literally grinding these pellets up. And then there was some sort of solvent. I'm going to say DMSO, but I might be wrong. And whatever. And having to dry this stuff out and then put it into a solution that you could inject it into your body and so on and so forth, right? And you could probably go onto Google right now and find yourself a variant of that. But of course, in reality, we don't have to do those things. But this is what bodybuilders were doing back in the day. On the Parabolin thing, Steve, I think multiple interviews over the last 5-10 years, whatever, you've had Dorian Yates and other bodybuilders, but specifically, I remember Dorian Yates almost glowy-eyed at the idea, oh, you should have had paraboling back in the day, guys. It was amazing. It transformed my physique. It took me to the next level. I wasn't using crazy amounts, only 150 milligrams a week and all this kind of. And honestly, he's not the only one that's kind of talking in that sort of, yeah, it was fucking a golden time, Steve. It was an amazing time. That kind of sort of vibe. And what Steve says about the history of the sport in terms of the physique transformation, Steve and I have touched upon the history of the iron game and specifically bodybuilding a few times. And one of the things that we agree 1000% on is the transformation of physiques. You could probably not, I mean, I know the history, so I'd be able to do it easy, but you could probably take a physique, and if you could morph it on some sort of Photoshop program and say, this is the 70s, this is the 90s, this is the 2000s, and you wouldn't tell us what those dates were, we could tell you what the dates were by looking at the physiques. And the transformation from the 80s and 90s and the 90s into 2000s was growth hormone, Tren, and to the end of that time, insulin. And you can look at the physiques now and go, oh, that physique's from 2020, that physique's from 1990, and so on and so forth. And part of the reason for that, absolutely, and we're not the only show, we're not the only podcast that said this, is the transformation for Tren. And one of the things I will add that I've heard Steve say, and again, this is another thing I agree with Steve 1000% on. And Steve's used the analogy of chemical warfare, which again I agree. And he said, if your competition's using Tren and you're not using Tren, and you have to understand that these guys that are on the Olympia stage all have amazing genetics to be bodybuilders, especially in the open class, to be absolute freaks. And you are leaving something on the table, then you are at a disadvantage. You can argue, Steve, as we have done, about the use of diuretics versus sort of properly losing the water, different diuretics that you can use, one that depletes you, one that does not. And, you know, the amount of growth and the amount of steroids and the amount of insulin, we could argue those things all day. But I would be incredibly surprised if there wasn't a top bodybuilder, certainly top 20 bodybuilder, on stage at the Olympia for the last 20 years that at some point hasn't used Tren. And specifically, I would probably say now that if there's 20 fellas on stage, statistically speaking, at least 15 of them are absolutely using Tren for that competition within a very short period of time to going on stage. Never mind if they've used it at some point in their prep. I'd be incredibly surprised. And because of the things that we're going to talk about, what it does to the physique, this is sometimes why you will see certain physiques that are almost Olympia compatible, almost freaky, top 20, top 30 in the world. When they become professional, they can suddenly start afford to do certain particular things. They can suddenly go pharmaceutical all the time. They can have a doctor on side or whatever else. And I guarantee you, especially those ones that are working with prep coaches, will be sort of using the PEDs, and specifically, again, it's in this example, Tren properly, as in a way that suits their physique, and a way that's going to get them ready for stage and so on and so forth. So, I mean, look, just in the strongman stuff, and I've touched upon this in the past, I know for a fact, absolute fact, from the horse's mouth of strongman buddies who are arguably, Steve, not really best suited because of their body fat percentage being much higher than pro bodybuilders or even an amateur competing bodybuilders. You tend to have a higher percentage of body fat, and they will struggle more with the side effects. And yet, Tren is in that mix more often than perhaps you'd think it might be, just for the sheer size that these guys carry, and certainly for the crazy optimal strength that's required at the very highest level. It might be, and I saw a great show on this just recently, not necessarily at bodybuilder amounts of usage, etc., because we're talking about another bunch of freaks when you're 330 pounds and 360s an average for the top 10 world's strongest man. These guys are big motherfuckers before they get into strongman, and even bigger motherfuckers when they are there. But again, the numbers might be less than perhaps some amateurs, less than you might think, but nevertheless, it's still in the mix somewhere with a good number of those fellas, just enough again to give you and tip you over into arguably being a potential person to get on the podium and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Again, some of those guys might have even experimented with high levels, found it was horrendous and dropped it to low levels, but it is still there in the mix at some point in their prep.
Yeah, and I can remember too, just to kind of take a step back from what you're saying, Mobster. But I can remember on the forums, we'd have guys that would sell. They'd brew these pellets at home and they'd sell them to other people on the forums. They'd sell them to people at the gym. This is very
Gigs and all.
dangerous, very, very
Yeah,
dangerous and toxic. And a lot of
yeah.
people would get very sick from it. You'd hear stories of people going, 2, 3, 4 days throwing up from using this crap.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
people,
look, Steve, just the mix is how bad would the impurity risk be? How fucked up? And this is, look, guys, we've talked about benzoyl alcohol and steroids and the issue with PIP. We've talked about this post-injection pain on other shows. It only has to be off a little tiny percentage, Steve, and it will sting like a motherfucker. If someone's mixing this thing up in the house and they don't understand proper chemistry, not school chemistry, Steve, but proper chemistry, and the solvent is a little bit too much, or the alcohol, or the solution that they put it in is a little bit too strong, Jesus Christ, it's like homebrew. Listen, if you've homebrewed beer or even made your own jam and you don't cook it long enough, say, for example, in the jam case, that thing can be full of fungus. Take the jam lid off. I'm not eating that. Same thing with beer. If you don't get it right, the percentage of alcohol can be next to nothing or fucking like 9% or something. Now, that's stuff that we would eat or drink. Now we're talking about a drug that's been homemade with solvents and alcohol and maybe a fucking coffee filter, Steve, and you're injecting it. So what Steve's saying, absolutely, if the people that was selling these things or even selling the product, I've done it for you, buddy. I've used this. I was fine. Love it, but you stung like a bitch. You're getting rid of it because it stings like a bitch, but you want your money's worth. So yeah, listen, absolutely, Steve. It only has to be a couple of percent off. We get guys on the internet, on the forums right now, and I tease them a little bit about math, don't I, Steve? And I say, look, when they're mixing up, say, a powder form of a peptide, and I want to put it in back water, but I'm getting confused that when I'm using an insulin syringe about how many milligrams is in going to be per mil, and I'm using this, and then we do the maths for them, right? And that's just a really, relatively speaking, quite safe peptide. It's not going to fuck you up. It's not going to kill you. It might be the wrong concentration if you get it wrong. But no, what we were talking about here, Steve, was bacterial infections, the wrong amount of alcohol, too high a percentage of solvent. It wasn't cleaned, wasn't filtered. You're using a fucking coarse coffee filter. You're not using proper filters. You're not pushing it through the actual syringe filters that you can buy when you want triple layers and so on and so forth. And that's what it was like, Steve, in the 80s. Absolutely. So what
yeah.
Steve's saying, I'm again agreeing. Yeah, go on.
So we're very lucky today that we have brands like Euro Pharmacies that actually know what they're doing, and they're producing this stuff in an actual lab, and they're synthesizing this stuff properly, safely, so that you can take it in a safe manner when used
Yeah,
properly. Of course, these are still very powerful hormones, and you have to respect them, especially with Trenbolone. So we're going to talk
yeah,
about how to safely use them. So a little background on Trenbolone before I bring you back in, Mobster. So on paper, Trenbolone is considered 5 times more androgenic, 5 times more anabolic than straight testosterone. Testosterone has a 100-to-100 ratio. Trenbolone has a 500-by-500 ratio. So it's on paper 5 times more androgenic and anabolic than testosterone. And in real life, it's quite a bit more androgenic and anabolic than straight testosterone. A lot of times these on paper ratios don't translate to real life, but in this case, I can safely say that yes, Trenbolone is a hell of a lot more powerful than just straight testosterone. So Trenbolone, look, it's a potent androgen. It does an amazing job of boosting protein synthesis, of muscle building, nitrogen retention. One of the best steroids out there of all the main steroids that people use and that are popular. Trenbolone blows them away. Like Trenbolone, like I said at the beginning, it's the Lamborghini of steroids. And another thing about Trenbolone, there's a modification at the 19th position. So it is in the family of 19 nor steroids, including, which also includes nandrolone, but it's nothing like nandrolone. And
no,
it's nothing like nandrolone. In fact, some of the things that it does actually in the body is completely opposite than nandrolone. I'll give you a quick example. When you take nandrolone or Deca, as people call it, you'll
Yeah.
notice an increase in appetite. But with Tren, it's different. A lot of people will actually experience less appetite because it's so, it's so inflammatory in the body that they lose their appetite where you feel nauseous. If you eat too much on Tren, you'll get nauseous from eating too much. But Deca, it's like you can't eat enough. So they don't work the same, even though they're in the same family of steroids. But a lot of people confuse that because they'll say, "Oh my God, Deca's, oh my God, it's 19 nortestosterone. I'm scared of taking those, so I don't want to use Tren for the same reasons because it doesn't fit what I'm looking for." But these steroids couldn't be any more opposite. And we're going to get into the benefits of Tren on the next segment. If you're ready, Mobster, we can start getting into.
Yeah, let me just touch on the chemistry lesson here, guys. One of my buddies back in the day was borderline, I mean, absolutely OCD and obsessive about certain particular things. Did not have the greatest physique. Wasn't the strongest motherfucker. But on occasion, if he focused his sort of psyche into this kind of stuff, could tell you the chemical position. And the reality it is an enormous and diverse. I've touched upon over 100 steroids that exist, anabolic alone. And obviously, we're really more familiar with about 20 or so steroids, different esters, etc., etc. Listen, right? It can be almost identical and therefore on paper would be considered in simple terms identical, but there only has to be the slightest fucking change. And it's night and day. As Steve said, I mean, because as an example, arguably with Deca, when we talk about the anti-inflammatory sort of thing, how it makes your joints feel better when you're on cycle, doesn't do so much when you come off cycle, Steve. It's not any better. It hasn't cured the strain that you had. It hasn't cured the wear and tear. But when you're on cycle, people say, "Oh, yeah, my joints feel more lubricated, I feel better." Tren isn't doing that. And yet it's almost identical on paper. So it was like that sort of stuff. You really do need, as per what Steve said earlier on, a top level graduate. And this is what these underground labs like Euro Pharmacies is doing, approved sources, etc. They are taking people from universities, the graduates, masters, and in chemistry, and taking them and say, "Listen, come and work for us. You'll be doing something. You've got a muscular physique. You look like you train as well. Come and work for us. Get 100,000 euros a year." Top chemists, people are straight out of university, see if they come and work for them. These are not, it's not some Mickey Mouse job. And honestly, they need to know stuff like you move this carbon atom, you move this molecule around, and it makes a hell of a difference. It's a completely different product. It's a completely different steroid. And one's making you feel good and one not. The other thing, and I will touch on this just briefly, Steve, and this applies to all steroids. The more anabolic and or the more androgenic a steroid is, in other words, arguably the more potent it is, the more likely you are to have side effects, the more likely you have to have inflammatory response. If a drug puts 5 pounds on you over, say, an 8-week cycle, manageable, keepable, etc., and another drug, B, puts 20 pounds on, trust me, as much as we love the 20-pound steroid, there will be more side effects because you're creating a much more stimulatory, inflammatory, you're making a much higher response, you're forcing the body to do more things. That's just the case. But of course, we know about these side effects. You're listening to this podcast, that's how you know. And so we are aware of what the reasons are. We understand what's going to happen, and therefore we make the choices that we make. Again, that's why you're listening to this show. Let's move on, like you said, Steve.
All right, so what is Tren good for? So let's start with, the facts are of if you're looking, let's start with powerlifting. I mean, if you're looking to get stronger, as I told you in the previous segment, Tren does a lot of things in the body, and it does a lot of things in the body better than any other of the main steroids. This is why when they did a poll, they asked people, "What is the most popular steroid? What is your favorite steroid?" Tren was in the top 5. I think it was number 4 on the list.
Yeah, I
Because
think so.
it's
4 or 5, yeah.
it does so many different things. So when it comes to powerlifting, you want strength, you want to improve your strength, and Tren is the one that you can take, and it will blow through any plateau that you
You
have.
have done, Stevesmi has done, and I remember this, and Steve will back me up. You've done your best ever bench press around 400 pounds, and I outweigh you, Steve, probably by 50 or 60 pounds, if not more. And you have done 400 pounds on Tren.
Yeah, so I ran Tren quite a bit in my 30s. And one of the things that I was able to do on Tren on 2 different cycles was break a new PR. So I used it, came off of it for like 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, then went back on it. And again, the second time I went on, I again broke a PR. In the
Yeah.
process, I also blew out my shoulder because I was literally doing so much weight. So Trent, I
Yeah.
mean, it's ungodly that I mean squats. I was like fucking squatting like 600 pounds, man, like raw. I'm not talking about on the fucking
That's
Smith.
crazy
Yeah,
shit.
yeah. It was it,
I'm
dude.
not doing much what I am. I'm
It
doing a bit
makes you
more than that. Steve.
so
Fucking hell.
strong. It makes you so strong that you actually
Yeah.
end up causing injuries because you're doing so
Yeah.
much fucking weight that your
You've
body
got
shouldn't
too
be doing.
strong for your tendons and your connective
Yeah.
tissues too quickly instead of building up to that weight. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
Even though I was building up to the weight, I was building up to the weight, but even with that, it takes you beyond your limits.
Yes. Yes.
So I mean, a lot of people out there they're like licking their chops, like I can't wait to use this stuff. Just keep in mind when you
Yeah, yeah.
use it, you've got to be disciplined, and because it's
Yes.
going, you can't get greedy on it. And almost as like as soon as you hit your PR, you got to come off of it to kind of back off away from it to let your,
Yeah,
like you
give you
said,
some
to
time
let
to recover. Yeah.
yeah, you got to let things. But it's like it, even in that case, you're doing so much weight, and
Mm.
you know it's such a grind on the body that it causes. But that's what it does for powerlifting. Now for
Mm.
bodybuilding, everybody you go to any competition, okay, any at least a regional competition, the
Yeah.
guys in the gal, you know, the guys that are doing well in these competitions are using Tren. And if you're not the one on stage using Tren, then you're probably not going to win. So Tren is absolutely necessary for the reasons I said in the last segment. It does everything the anabolic steroids do, all the good things the anabolic steroids do, but to the next level. So it's
Yeah.
going to help you build even more muscle. It's going to help you get even more leaner. It's going to help you with even more vascularity. It's going to help you get even more harder, especially when you're stacking it properly, as we'll get to later in the show.
What
So
about recomposition, Steve?
yeah,
Right. So we did a show just in the last few days, which won't have gone live yet as we record this one, and we discussed specifically recomposition. And of course, Tren had to be included at least. I would say that Tren, when we talk about steroids and when we specifically talk about recomposition is essentially the sort of the magic wand shit of I want to gain muscle and lose fat, and I want to do that at the same time. And normally we would say lose fat this way, give yourself a bit of time, come off cycle, have a breather, do your PCT, go back on cycle. Now add muscle. Now that's a lean bulk or dirty bulk or whatever, right? And normally that's the way we would say to do things. And steroids obviously can get in the mix a little bit there, specifically. You know, they're all anabolic, so you would add some muscle, but you might not lose much fat, and so on and so forth. When it comes to recomposition, Tren is probably el numero uno. I can't think of anything else, Steve. There might be steroids with more side effects. There might be harder to use steroids. But in terms of recomposition, losing fat and adding muscle at the same time might not be perfect, but it's certainly the PED of choice. And very much, for course, you know, if you're bulking in the off season as a pro bodybuilder, weightlifter, or whatever, and you need to lose weight to make weight for a specific weight class, or you need to look lean, and you're even growing into a competition, then yeah, the what it can do to you in combination with other PEDs on a cycle and so on and so forth is the recomposition drug of choice. That is probably the only one that's going to get you anywhere close to the, you know, the fairy godmother waving a magic wand or something like this and transforming your physique in that particular way. There are, and I'll touch on this as well, Steve, every single PED based bodybuilding, whatever you want to call it, forum out there will have Tren fans. These guys, they're almost okay with the side effects. That doesn't mean it's a perfect life or whatever else, but they know that for them, if I can feel the side effects, that's the Tren working. And you will see phrases slightly tongue in cheek, a little bit sort of in fun sometimes, but there's a great element of truth to this where they will say Tren is gold, which is kind of the color that it comes in, but they're sort of emphasizing the fact that it's like gold, the metal, and Tren is God. And for them, it's almost like the old conversations we used to have in the 80s where every single cycle had to have a test space. For these guys, because of the result, because of how much muscle or how strong they're going to get, because they know it's going to transform their physiques, they're almost a given that at some point, whatever cycle they're running, Tren will make an appearance. So though I mean, whether they're psychos or not, Steve. But I mean, I've used it. You've used it. We know what it does. We know that it's had an effect on our bodies. I've done it on a cut and recomposition, 100%, man. I lost. I think I went from 327 and a half down to 320, and then I recomped, and I only did a 4-week cycle on a cut product, back up to 327, but leaner than I'd been before at 327 with my belt, as I said, 2 notches down. In fact, arguably, Steve, I've just taken my weightlifting belt down another notch, although I am slightly lighter in body weight, but nevertheless, absolutely, I recomped on it. So, you know, that's why it's out there. It has that effect. It's not for everybody. And we'll get into that as well. But let's obviously move on to the next subject when you're ready, Steve.
Yeah, so let's talk about cutting. I've seen guys who eat crap. They follow if it fits your macros. They don't know what they're doing when it comes to their diet. I've seen them use Tren and have these transformations where they look the best they've ever looked. And then they'll take a picture of themselves and put it on social media or put it as their avatar. And it's like, wow, look how good I look. And then you actually look at what they actually look like now, and they look like shit when they come off Tren. So they actually only look good when they're on Tren. That's how good Tren is. It can literally make you look the best you're ever going to look in your life while you're on it. And then when you come off, you look like shit, because that's how powerful it is. So keep that in mind when it comes to Tren. That's another aspect. But it's funny because these people, they don't know how to eat. They follow if it fits your macros. They eat fast food, and they still manage to cut on Tren, because Tren is so fucking good when it comes
Ironically, Steve, and you and I have said this, if they ate better, if they ate cleaner, if they didn't do if it fits their macros, they'd have been even more amazing. They'd have been a better transformation. And of course, if they kept the fucking diet clean after and accommodated the changes, they would still look good.
So it's almost like Tren covers up their bad diet. Tren covers up their bad training, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what Tren can do. But again, when you come off, you get that boomerang effect where, as good as it made you look on, you're just going to lose everything when you come off. So it's kind of stupid to do that. So you might as well, as Mobster said, you might as well get your diet and training on point and try to look, you know, good year round. The only area where Tren, you don't want to use Tren is if you're an endurance athlete. So that's where Tren can hurt you, because it's so damn inflammatory in the body that it will make it harder for you to do cardio. So if you're running, let's say, an 8-minute mile, and then you go on Tren, you're going to lose like a minute or two off your time, if not more. It's going to have you huffing and puffing. So that's really the only aspect. So, you know, as long as you're not worried about your endurance and stuff, you know, cutting, recomping, competing in bodybuilding, powerlifting, all these different things, you know, even just, you know, being a gym rat in general, no matter what you want to do, it's going to help you across the board with that. So it's really the king of all steroids, as Mobster was mentioning, and it really is. And it's one of those things where, you know, if it's like I said, it's like getting a Lamborghini, like in driving that thing. You can never go back. You can't go from using Tren to using Primo. You know, it's just like you'll run Primo and you're like, what the hell is like, what the hell is this? Why am I wasting my time? I was getting these crazy results on Tren. My bench press was shooting up 20, 30 pounds within a couple weeks on Tren. I'm on Primo and my bench press moved 5 pounds. Like, there's no comparison, you know, and the way the Tren transforms your physique is like nothing else. So at some point, those of you listening to this, pace yourself, get to the point where you try Tren. It's just like driving in a fucking race car. You want to do it once in your life, or bungee jumping or skydiving. You want to do these things once in your life just to get the thrill out of it. But really, if you're really serious about this, it's one of those things where eventually you'd want to use, but it, you know, obviously you want to use it properly. And that's what we're trying to do on this podcast.
Let me give you one more thing, Steve, and we will get into it properly on the side effects, etc. One more thing, right? Steve's used a phrase previously about it in another show, I believe, a couple of times, Steve, where we talked about it, quote unquote, being a relationship killer. So I want you to know how you handle steroids, full stop. What would you like on Debo? What would you like on Anavar? What would you like on this former test? Did you use this in a cycle? Did you use that in a cycle? It should never be your first choice for steroids. Well, obviously, I can see some of you rubbing your hands together in glee with the idea of using it. If you've not used any steroids, you definitely want to see how you get on with manage your testosterone, etc. When you previously before Tren. And the other argument, Steve, I would not want to be in the middle of the divorce. I wouldn't want to be doing exams or anything crazy stressful. Where I mean, this is a phrase I've used as well, Steve, and I've actually had Tren users say the same thing. So it's not sort of too far away from the truth. If you're an arsehole off of steroids and you use steroids and they make you more of an arsehole, then Tren's going to make you more of an arsehole again. You want to be at the point in your life where you're sort of chilled the fuck out, managing your shit, not dealing with any stress or aggravation, not going for divorce, not being thrown out of the house, not being evicted, not being made bankrupt or whatever else. Because we've seen a void rage argument thrown around, and it's a bit silly. It's never an actual proven thing. But there are certain particular PEDs, and I think Tren is the one more than anything else, certainly for use on a proper cycle rather than even shorter periods of time, say, for example, like Halo or Trek Drops, where if you're in a shitty mood or if you're not a very nice person to know, Tren's going to fuck you up a bit more. If you are a perfectly nice guy, you're chilled the fuck out, etc., go ahead, because it's not going to change you into a monster. But if you're already a bit of a dick, you just become more of a dick. So, and Steve's talked about the relationship killing aspect, I think, in terms of, he was more likely to look around at other girls. He was more likely to put it crudely, sniff skirt or whatever, versus how he was normally and how chilled out he is normally. So, there's a little bit of aspect of that. Let's get into the options, Steve. I was surprised, and Steve and I have got a list, quite a list, how many Euro Pharmacies options there are. I will preface this by saying products come and go. The form that they're in will come and go. So we're going to give you the complete list, and that's available across multiple sites, different information from different places. So you won't necessarily be able to buy these things right now. Some they'll come in soon, some are out of stock, and so on and so forth. So it changes, but we're going to give you all of the options that we could find right now. I'll start at the very top, Steve. Tren Ace in a 15 ml vial, which is one of the newer things that Euro Pharmacy is doing, and that's 75 milligrams per mil. And they also still do, and you can still find this, a 10 ml version of Tren Ace in 100 milligrams per mil version. Now, I'll touch on this one, Steve. When we talk about using Tren, and if you've never used Tren, if you want to know if you're going to manage the side effects and how you feel on Tren, we talk about using the shorter ester version, like Ace, at the beginning. So either your first cycle, I don't know if I'm going to manage it, Steve, Mobster. I think I might be good, I might be bad. How will I know? Well, listen, if it's a longer acting ester, it could be in your system for days, weeks. But you want a shorter acting ester that's in and out of your system in a couple of days. So you've only got to put up with the side effects for a couple of days. And we're always going to recommend using a shorter acting ester the first time, just to see how you get on with it, just to see how you manage it. And if it's horrendous, well, you stop. And then you can change to a longer acting ester, you can change to something else, a different steroid, and so on, Steve. What do you think on that before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, and that's a good thing about Euro Pharmacies, that they give you different options. So, you can definitely try different things. Really, they have everything when it comes to Tren. Flexibility is important with Tren. And Euro
Yes.
Pharmacies knows this. This is why you don't see big milligram per milliliter. The highest milligram per milliliter that we're going to talk about is 200 milligrams a milliliter with these Tren options. And that's because if you get into a situation where the side effects are too much, or you want to kind of lower the dose, or you want to come off of it, it's not going to be such a big amount that it's going to really mess with you as much as you want. So move on to the next one, Mobster, and we'll start talking about how to stack, because they do have some blends as well.
Yeah, I mean, the next one is a product they've called Eurobolin, and these are not necessarily in alphabetical order, it's just the way that we got the list. 10 mil version of this still available, and that's across multiple platforms. 80 milligrams a milliliter, and Eurobolin is a Tren Hex version. Again, Steve, with something like this one is definitely the color that some people absolutely love. Like, for some particular reason, it's not as actually a bigger indicator as you think it is, but the darker the color, the more Tren is in there. And of course, it's actually only 5 milligrams stronger than the Tren Hex version that I just discussed. I guarantee that there are certain people out there, so Tren Hex, again, Steve, You'll know better than me when it comes to hex. Are we talking about a shortish? It's not as short as ACE, but slightly longer version. I can't remember with the hex.
Yeah, it's kind of in the middle of the E and
That's what I was
ACE.
thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's in the middle. Yeah.
yeah. So this would be this again. It's only a tiny little bit more potent, but definitely again, you've already realised that you're okay with Tren. You can manage the side effects. You know what to expect. You've done the ACE suggestion that I give you guys already. I can see this being stacked. 80 milligrams of Tren, along with some sort of testosterone, Steve. What would I be looking at with something like this? Because I'm a low dose kind of guy. I think I'd be looking at probably 240 milligrams, so 3 mil a week of this particular one, and maybe something like 500 milligrams of a form of testosterone. Again, probably with a medium sort of ester level. So maybe an enanthate for me with this particular one. Enanthate is quite long in this particular regards, and I've still got the option of taking the Tren in and out of the cycle. The
Yeah, and
strength
then
I can see me. Yeah, go on.
no, I was gonna say with Hex, one of the things over the years that I've heard from guys, these are like the biggest meathead,
Mm.
bodybuilder types. They believe in training their muscle, but not training their brain. That kind of demographic. But they've been insisting for years, and that Hex is better than other trend options. And a lot of that, look, I've used the Hex, I've used the E, I've used the Ace, I've used the blends, I've used it all.
Yeah.
Trend to me is trend. It doesn't matter if it's Hex, Ace, E, a blend, it doesn't
No,
matter. I've always
no.
had, but they insist in their minds that Hex is a lot better. So it's just a matter of maybe it's just something psychological, or maybe it is true. I'm not sure, but I've never noticed anything with my blood work, any types of changes. So at the end of the day, it's one of those things where some people say, well, Hex is cleaner, blah, 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 blah. But you got to remember, Parabolin was Hex. So
Yeah.
they're probably just parroting a lot of the stuff they heard back
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
90s.
Look, what
Yeah.
if it comes to esters, Steve, as we've said on other shows,
I,
we say the
but
old adage of test is test, mate. It's just going to be where you are in a composition cycle, where you are in a prep, and
here's
what you want
here's
in your
here's
system,
my
what's coming out.
But here's my point. You're not following me. My point is, if they heard from someone who used the original Parabon, which was the Hex, and they're like, well, this is pharmaceutical grade. They went from using a pharmaceutical grade Tren to using a Tren that was brewed from pellets. And they're like, wow, this is much more dirty. This is much more toxic. This is not as effective. You could see why they would have that bias. So
Mm.
my point is, today with Euro Pharmacies, all these trend options that we're going to talk about are equally as good. So you don't have to worry about quality
Yeah.
differentials and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I think that's what that is based on. I don't think it's based on actual reality or science, but that's just my opinion. Let us know in the comments, guys, what you think about that. But go on, Mobster. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, again, what would you use this as a cycle, Steve? What would you cycle this with, and for bodybuilding purposes? How would you run it?
Yeah, so it just look, at the end of the day, here's the thing with Tren. Tren is one of those steroids you can use it completely solo and you have great results on it. You
Yeah.
know, and a lot of people say, "Oh, you have to stack Tren with it. You have to stack this with it. You have to stack test with it." A lot of people are like, "Oh, you have to have a test base with it." No, you don't. Tren is actually, when you run it by itself. I ran it by itself. You get tremendous results on Tren by itself because it's
Mm.
already so androgenic and so anabolic. So why would you even need to stack anything with it? You don't need testosterone as a base with it. You get
What
actually
about a
less.
dose? What about dosage, Steve? I said 240 milligrams, or perhaps something else. Would you run if you ran this solo? How much would you have per week?
Yeah, so I mean, anywhere from 150, 200 area up to 300, 350 area. I've run it as high as 400, and the side effects were unbearable. Then I dropped it
Mm.
down to 350. I had actually better results going 300, 350 versus 400,
Yeah,
just because I had less side effects. So it's really a matter of, you got to kind of experiment with it. But even a 50 milligram difference per week makes a big difference when it comes to side effects. And then you get into the laws of diminishing returns. But
yeah,
professionals, we've seen their stacks. They're running it
yes,
500, 750, 1,000 or more.
yeah,
They
yeah.
really are beyond. At that point, they're just like, fuck the side effects. I just want to get results. So
I would, for most listeners and most users, 300 milligrams seems to be the sweet spot if you can manage the side effects. I'll move on to the next one here, Steve. So there's quite a few options, as I said before. They do a Trenbolone enanthate in a 15 ml version, which is 150 milligrams a milliliter, and they're still doing, or you'll still find this, a 10 milliliter, 200 milligrams of the Tren enanthate. So, like we said, there's a surprising number of options out there. Looking at this one again, Steve, if we were running it solo, that would be 2 ml a week. I'd probably spread out the opinion, but again, in an enanthate, it's a relatively long ester anyway, so you could probably do 2 ml once a week. Of the 10 ml, mil and a half, Steve, again for that 300 milligrams. And that, again, combinations, it's a slightly longer actiness, as I said already, certainly a lot longer than the ACE version. We'll see this be the foundation of multiple stacks if you want to run a stack. Honestly, Steve, I mean, bearing in mind my first version, my first use of Tren, which was only last year, was as part of a cup product, and there is a couple of cup products, 3 in fact, that we're going to discuss. If I was running it solo, and I know how I feel on it, I would probably keep the actual weeks that I was on cycle relatively short, but I can certainly see me going either the Trini 150 milligrams twice a week, or the 10 ml version, 200 milligrams, mil and a half a week, and probably running it solo the next time if I decide to use it again. That's probably how I would run it, and just do nothing else, because I know the recomposition effects are going to be amazing. And it only arguably, either way that I've just discussed with you listeners, is only slightly less, I believe, than the combined total of the Tren that I was taking as part of the cutting mixes. I think it was a fraction under those numbers, a little bit under 300 milligrams a week. What about the next couple of options, Steve? You read these out.
So the next one, did you talk about the EP cutting mix? Is that the next one?
Yeah, the next one is the cutting mix, the first one.
Yeah, so EP,
actually, have we? Sorry. I don't believe we've touched on the Tri-Tren. That's me jumping ahead again.
All right, so let me do the Tri-Tren then. The EuroPharmacies Tri-Tren, there's 10 milliliter option, 150 milligrams a milliliter, which is a mix of the acetate, the enanthate, and hex, 50 milligrams each. So as I talked about earlier, if you're one of those people, you're like, well, I like hex. I want to try something. So you can just do all 3. You can't decide. A lot of people come on the forum that I can't decide. Should I do the A's? Should I do the E? Should I do the hex? Do all 3. Why not? Euro Pharmacies has you covered. I run the Tri-Tren.
How long the cycle's going to be, whatever.
Look, personally, I don't notice the difference. Whether I use ACE, E, hex, I don't notice the difference. Tren is Tren. It fucking hits you like a ton of bricks by like week 2, week 3. It hits you like a ton of bricks no matter what. But if you want to use the Tri-Tren and use all 3, some people like it. Some people like the mix of all 3 together, and it gives them a little jolt, to their thing. So you can go this way, and like I said, each one is 50 milligrams a milliliter. The next one, the EP Cutting Mix 200, is an interesting mix. Now, this is for people who like doing tests with Tren. And in this case, you're getting test propionate and you're getting the Tren Ace, which are both short esters, 100 milligrams each. So this is one you want to inject every other day, every third day, every 2.5 days, something like that. You can even do it every day, tiny, tiny amounts. And the good thing about this one, it's good for those of you who like to inject small amounts of gear often. And then you'll get it in your system quicker. And more importantly, it'll be out of your system quicker. So on cycle, if something goes wrong, you can always stop. So with this one, depending on your dosage, you want to keep in mind testosterone does aromatize into estrogen. So you don't want to end up using Tren, having the anabolic side effects, the androgenic side effects, and estrogenic side effects added from the test. And the testosterone also adds more of those androgenic and anabolic side effects as well. So you don't want to get into an estrogenic mess. So make sure you go and you get the Euro Pharmacies, Aromacin, or Arimidex as well. That would work really good to stack with. There's also the Cutting Mix 300, and this one is a little different because it's test prop and it's Tren Ace, but it's also Masteron propionate. So this one is good, and this is 100 milligrams of each. That comes out to 300 milligrams per milliliter. This one is good for those of you who want to add Masteron, who want to do a nice recomp, who are good reactors to testosterone. And you want to, instead of doing the Masteron and Tren together, you add the test prop with it. So it gives you a little boost with your libido and other things that a lot of you out there who like testosterone like. And that would be a good option for those of you who insist on using testosterone in every cycle. That would be a good one to use. You could go ahead and use this. Since you're getting 100 milligrams of each, you can go ahead and do like 300 milligrams of each, and it comes out to 300 milligrams total. When you do, if you do 3 cc's of this per week, you could do it like 3 times a week. So there's 7 days in a week, so you can space it out where you're doing it 3 times a week, 1 cc, and that will give you 300 milligrams of each, and that's a damn good recomp per mobster. If you can't recomp on that stack, then bodybuilding isn't for you. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, listen, guys, and I think it probably applies to a lot of cutting cycles. I'm going to agree, certainly to more pinning frequency in this particular regards. Every similar product I've seen uses shorter esters. So, and I'm including myself, I think you're looking realistically at about 3 times per week, but you don't have to put massive amounts in. With the 300 here, 3 times a week would be 900 milligrams total. So perhaps that might prove a little bit too much for some of you in that particular regards. And I think I'd include myself. I'd probably only do half a mil 3 times a week, Steve. That'd be 450 milligrams total. Listen, guys, the simple fact of the matter is that companies like Euro Pharmacies are putting together products for you because they know how you want products to be put together. They know that you've been buying products separately and putting them together in the same syringe and injecting them. They know that shorter acting esters seem to work better for a cut and make it easy for you to manage how you look. And as I was touching upon earlier on when I was talking about competition bodybuilders, it's a question sometimes of the shorter esters tend to go towards the end of a competition prep or cycle, simply so that you can manage the side effects, you can manage how your body's going to look, and you want things that are in your system quickly and out of your system quickly, so you can manage that stage look. Because arguably, Steve, and we discussed this when we talked about professional bodybuilding, the look can literally change from morning to evening. When you do the Olympia, it can change from the Saturday look to the Sunday look. And we've seen that. So, well, honestly, I think last year's show, there was complaints because the pros, the open class, didn't get on stage till 11 o'clock at night. And, you know, just the simple stress, never mind how they were prepping for the stage, was transforming certain physiques that weren't ready to go on stage at 11 o'clock at night. These guys are normally in fucking bed by then, and he was asked to come on stage and try to look their best. That was on the Saturday. On the Sunday, they were on stage earlier, and some of them looked almost transformed from the night before. That's how sort of fine and complex of a process that kind of being ready to go on stage and look your absolute best in front of a judge. Look, it'd be like running 100 meters, Steve. You know, if it's 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to break any world records. If it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, I'm probably going to be better warmed up, more well-fed, better rested, etc., and that they're ready to break the 10-second barrier. And this is how complex it can get. So definitely, listen, I've used cutting products. Steve's using cutting products. I've told you how effective they are. And the simple fact of the matter is they got 3 options. So the third option is called Rapid Cut 350. And this is Trenace, 75 milligrams, Masteron Prop, 75 milligrams, testosterone prop, 75 milligrams, and then testosterone cypionate, which is a much longer acting ester compared to the others, which is 125 milligrams. I'm going to say, Steve, because we've done similar shows to this, I've not seen a combination like this. So definitely this, I could see someone using this at the beginning of a longer cut, whereas the other products that you could probably look at an 8-week or 12-week. This is something I could see someone that's going to push it out to 16 weeks using. And again, the numbers aren't crazy. So some of the others have got 100 milligrams. This one's 75, 75, 75, and 125. Again, I'm thinking it's probably going to be a little bit milder in terms of side effects, more likely on a 12 to 16 week cycle. And again, I like the fact that certain companies like Euro Pharmacies have prepared products for different people. You might be slightly more out of condition, might be better on your diet, you might have more time to get ready. What do we see sometimes with cuts? And the reason why they're called rapid cut in this particular example is people that wanted to get in shape for a holiday and there's not much time. Whereas, of course, the best way to get into shape is to give yourself longer time. So the shorter products, the cutting mix 200 and the 300, are probably better off for an 8-week cycle, Steve, getting in shape, maybe even a 6-week cycle, and especially if you're half in shape already. And the rapid cut 350, I could see that being in a longer version or something like that. So what do you think about that, Steve, before we move on to the last two options?
Yeah, definitely. And the good thing about these blends, they blend it for you, so you don't have to stack any other thing. So we're going to talk
Yeah,
about the last two, and we're going to talk about some other of my personal favorites to stack with Tren that I've used in the past. And they have a couple amps. They're both Tren Ace, 100 milligrams per milliliter and a 200 milligram milliliter. I haven't seen a 200 milligram per milliliter Tren Ace from any other brand that I can recall. So that's a really good one for those of you who like the idea of in your system quick, out your system quick, and it's also much less injection volume. So that would be a really, really good option in that situation. So what are our favorite things to stack with Tren Mobster? So let me start out with Anavar. And Anavar is a mild option. So I'm a big believer when you're running these steroid cycles to keep things simple and also try to
yep,
limit side effects. And one of the ways you can limit side effects with Tren is by not stacking something with it that has side effects. So it seems to be common sense, right? I mean, I'm a logical thinking person. So Anavar would be the perfect option because Anavar comes with little side effects. It doesn't aromatize. It does have liver toxicity, but not a lot compared to other oral steroids that are out there. And it's a very mild DHT derivative. So it would be a great option with Tren, especially if you're doing a recomp or a cutter. But even with strength, look, Anavar with Tren was what I hit all-time strength PRs and body weight PRs with. So it's almost like both steroids work even better when you're stacking them together. And that's not an accident because Anavar being a DHT derivative, it does a great job of binding the SHBG, making the Tren actually work better. So you can use a little less Tren and still get the same results when you're adding Anavar. So a dose of Anavar anywhere from 30 to 40 milligrams. You could go as high as 50 milligrams a day. That would work really good with Tren. Another one, if you want to go a little cheaper route, because I like saving you guys money, is T-Bowl. And Toronto Bowl is also a good one. Same exact thing as Anavar, little less effective overall. It's a little weaker than Anavar in real world terms, but it's a really good stack with Tren. And I also hit PRs doing T-Bowl with Tren. And again, it's not an accident. It's because T-Bowl being also a DHT derivative binds really well to SHBG. So it makes the Tren work even better. So stacked works really good. I like stacking with something mild. Another option you could do with Tren, I've done this before, is stack Primo with it. Again, DHT derivative, low side effects. It's got some good qualities to it, like boosting immune system and stuff like that, that can really help you on Tren. And then Equipoise. Equipoise on Tren, if you're looking to boost your body weight, you're looking to bodybuild, put on some good quality muscle size and bulk up a little bit, Equipoise will be a good option as well with Tren. So those are my personal favorites with Tren that I like to use, those four steroids. And Euro Pharmacies has you covered with all of them. Mobster, any ideas before we move on?
I'm thinking, Steve, in terms of, for example, the Anavar and the Tren together would be fantastic for me if I was using them both for strength. Absolutely. The T-Bowl that Steve suggests, and I've actually got another suggestion you can add to that particular stack there, guys. We know that Tren can have an effect on your cardio. So, for example, the T-Bowl will help you with some of the cardio losses that you would get with Tren, but you could also include there, Steve, GW. And another one, Steve, and again, it's because of you and I doing these, and we discussed Masteron earlier on, but both Masteron and or Provaron at 25 milligrams a day as a way of freeing up or getting more free testosterone for use for anabolic purposes. So, and again, Provaron is not that strong of a drug in and of itself, but it's going to give you that more free test, and it simplifies. You're getting more out of what you're doing when you're on cycle. If I was a crazy powerlifter, especially one of the 80s and 90s powerlifters, both these two together would be super harsh. But we're looking at, for example, brief times with the Halo and brief times with the check drops, just a couple of weeks in both those examples to bring me in for competition. Check drops on the day of the competition, Halo running for a couple of weeks maybe. It's going to make me an absolute crazy nose-bleeding motherfucker with veins throbbing, but hopefully beast mode, taking fucking records, and especially for you guys that have to compete in bodyweight classes. Let's touch upon briefly, Steve, some of the side effects. Listen, right? we're just going to keep this short and sweet. We've done Tren podcasts before, and we don't want to bang the side effects drum too much because it is absolutely the best recomposition slash strength slash whatever the fuck you want, and it's going to have absolutely crazy motherfucking fans out there. But there are literally phrases we could say, things like trensomnia or tren sweats or the tren cough, because they are specific names for side effects. Trensomnia, because it's crazy, it's having crazy effects on your metabolism with the recomposition. So your metabolism is sped up and it can make it difficult to go to sleep. There are even, I think Steve's talked about some of the dreams you get on Tren. There are things you can do, Steve's like regard the Tren sweats, where some people, again, because of the metabolism, even just that excessive sweating at night time. So Steve said, for example, and I do this already, Steve, I have some dilute squash and or water by the bedside. I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm thirsty, I drink it, keeps me hydrated. But equally, just a fan by the side of the bed or air conditioning next to where you sleep, etc., and being prepared for these things. So yeah, I mean, there are others. Make sure you listen to other shows just to get a good idea of what we're talking about in that particular regards. Now, I want to finish on, Steve, with the Euro Pharmacy promo, purely and simply because, listen, right, and I've done this on other shows, Euro Pharmacies is my go-to source. There are other sources I use, there are other products I've tried, but Euro Pharmacies is my go-to. It's my daily staple. If I was using PEDs every single day, 90% of those PEDs would come from Euro Pharmacies. And it's because I know what I get when I get them. I've got some information on the company, I know who represents. I've tried the products, I've had great results, consistent, high quality, and so on and so forth, Steve. When we go on the europharmacies.net website itself, I can click on the lab test. When we go onto some of the reselling sites, I can do the same thing again. I can see up-to-date lab tests. We know that products have been tried and tested by independent members of our forums, off their own back, using their own money, bought products from different approved sources, including Euro Pharmacies, sent these products to the labs, and they've come back within the 5% deviation allowed by all pharmaceutical products. Every single thing came back. The member in question thought 2 of the 10 products he was testing might fail. None of them failed, and that includes Euro Pharmacies. They've got a couple of reps that are absolutely fucking amazing, and you can go onto our forums, put Euro Pharmacies into there, see if there's people that are running a log, and look at the physiques. Mine running for strength, other people looking to get cut, other people looking to get muscular, and you can see the results, not just of their training and their cardio and nutrition, but they will tell you whether they're getting post-injection pain. They will tell you if they have any issues and so on and so forth. So it's not a question of what you and I think. What do you think on why we like Euro Pharmacy, Steve?
Yeah, and they're one of the top brands. Whenever I have clients that I'm dealing with, they ask me, Steve, what's one of the, can you give me some brands? And Euro Pharmacies is one of the top 3 that I give to them because, we know if I order Tren and I want to make sure it's dosed properly, I know that I'm getting what I'm getting. Like Tren, if you get Tren from some dude at the gym, it's dangerous. Like he could sell you something that's overdosed. He could sell you something that's 50% Tren and 50% something else. We don't know what's in there. So you got to be smart when you're buying stuff. And Euro Pharmacies are a legit company. And when you order for them, you're getting what you're ordering. And that's the number one thing for me is I want to know what I'm putting in my body is what I'm purposely buying, not something else. It makes no sense. It makes no sense to eat organic. It makes and then not care what goes in your body when it comes to steroids. It doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense to avoid pesticides and herbicides and all these things that are around that are toxic that we shouldn't be consuming, or drinking tap water full of chlorine, or and you're avoiding that, but then you put anything in your body, you put steroids in your body from a buddy at the gym who knows where he got it from. So it's very, very important that we take care of what we put in our body. So Euro Pharmacies, they provide high quality products. They're tested, they're independently tested, and we know they are what they are. And that's very, very important to me. Finish up, Mobster.
Yeah, so listen, right, just one more comment on Euro Pharmacies. We discussed this on a recent show. They are innovative. They're the only company right now that we discuss on a regular basis that we personally use and approve, where they're providing 15 mil products. Everybody else is still doing the traditional 10 mil products. They've asked you what you want to see. They've asked you what information you want. They are literally out there trying to improve on a daily, yearly, monthly, weekly, whatever basis you want to consistently put out solid products, but at the same time, move forward into the future to be able to do that with different innovative products, different size vials, and so on and so forth. And one more thing, Stephen, I think you said this in a recent show. It isn't just this source or that source. You can go across multiple forums and multiple resellers, and you'll find Euro Pharmacies used again and again and again. Different forums that recommend it and people have used it, different sources that are supplying as resellers and so on and so forth. And they do that with a number of brands because those brands, like Euro Pharmacies, are solid, recommended, rated, approved, and get return customers coming back to those products again and again and again, like Steve and myself. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Come onto the forums and check out the logs, like I've said. Ask questions about Euro Pharmacies. Talk to the reps on the forums. Give any information you want. Any issues that Euro Pharmacies have ever had have been fixed double quick, Steve, whether it's customer service or product that needs to be pulled back and replaced, etc., etc. 3 days is the longest I've seen them have an issue like that. They are super, super fast at fixing problems, if problems ever come up. And again, the reviews, 5 stars, again and again and again. No problems whatsoever. Please note, we are not doctors and opinions are ours. It's our view and based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment apply.